What a great kick.
And Chad Townsend plays on. Plays to the whistle. Kicks away for Valentine Holmes. Cronulla's in again.
Wow.
Chad Townsend, brilliant.
Yes, hello everybody and welcome back to the Talk of the Town podcast. My name is Chad Townsend. I will be your host today, and today I have a very special guest, author, speaker, writer. She has a master's degree with distinction in business leadership, a bachelor degree in laws, graduate diploma of legal practice, admitted lawyer in New South Wales, organisational coach, and a bachelor's degree in international and global studies. Please welcome Sonia Diab.
Thanks, Chad. So cool to be here. Thank you.
Wow, what that is impressive.
Thanks. It sounds like I'm pretty addicted to education, actually, when you read it out like that.
She also has a website, www.status1.com.au, where you can find a lot of her leadership programs. Now, what type of programs are these on your website?
So I basically go in to companies and I work with them around all different areas around human behaviour, sales and leadership. So I'm really lucky actually because I get to play with a lot of different areas, from behavioural profiling to body language to the psychology of words, and of course then moving into things like negotiation and then the leadership side, which is a lot of productivity and then how to build like peak performance teams, for example.
Beautiful. Now, a few weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be on your panel at the launch of your book, Confidence is Uncomfortable, Overcome the 9 Millennial Blockers and Master Self-Leadership. Now, that was a really successful evening, wasn't it?
That was so cool. I think having a diverse industry of panelists. We had people from business to nonprofit, and then of course yourself as a professional athlete. And it was so interesting to see how all of you brought such different insights, but they all really connected in the same sort of line of thought. That was really cool. And I think, to be frank, I think we had a really good impact on a lot of people that night. So that was awesome.
I remember sitting in that room actually, and answering a few questions, and I just remember linking a lot of my answers back to rugby league, obviously, as that's because it was my background, but then listening to some of the other panelists and the way that they would link it into their background and how much I could relate it back to professional sports, I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about peak performance, I think something that's so interesting and a lot of people don't actually realise is, I work with corporations, and when I'm working with them around building a high performance team, for example, a lot of the behavioural science we actually get from athletes. Like a lot of it originates from studying the peak performance in athletes. So much of it actually completely crosses over. So that's why it was also really good to have your insights and bringing it back to rugby league too.
So why did you write the book?
Oh, why did I write the book? I always wanted to write a book,
Yep.
so there's that.
What an achievement though. Wow. Yeah. Tick it off. You've written a book.
Thank you. Yes, I want to tick it off. But now I want to write more books, and it's a dangerous cycle, I think, when you start writing. But with this particular one, I've worked with a lot of young professionals, millennials around our age, and in the last few years especially, I started to see the same patterns come up again and again around challenges that they were facing. And I think especially when we think about the environment that we're in and the rise of social media and technology and such an
crazy,
uncertain, changing world all the time, right?
Yeah.
And being in the public eye, I feel like you would know this more than more than most people. But because of that, it's so easy for people when they're trying to create success for themselves in whatever capacity to get really bogged down in comparing themselves to what they see on social media and, feeling this self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all these things that seem to become more common because of the environment that we have. So with this one, it's funny. Originally, I wanted to encapsulate everything that I do. So I wanted it to be about influence and leadership and all of these like really big things. And long story short, I ended up with a manuscript that every single person that I spoke to from the publishing industry just said that is way too long. So I had to bring it down. I had to bring it way down and say, well, what's the base thing? Well, in order to influence and lead, you have to start with confidence. So that's where it all really stemmed from.
And talk me through the process of writing a book. Obviously, you want to write a book. Mm-hmm. What are the stages after that? I'd love to know.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different approaches. For me, I have been talking about, I mean, most of my friends know probably from when I was a teenager that I would say, I want to write a book. But for me, when it came down to actually saying I'm going to do this, it was about building habits. So I would write every single day without fail. And I'd say, okay, every day I'm going to go for 1,500 words. And that would be my goal. And no matter what I had on that day, I would have to make the time.
Hands get sore?
Yes. Surprisingly, yes. So no matter what I had on, I had to try and do it. And a lot of the time people think there's a trick to it, but the truth is, you know, writing a book is really about sitting down and actually getting your words on paper. And once you've done that, yes, there's editing and then covers and marketing and all that stuff, but it's really about the dedication to say, well, I'm actually going to sit down and do this every day.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, today's podcast, we wanted to base it around leadership, and obviously with Sonia's background, it speaks for itself. But I've got a few questions for you if you don't mind answering.
Yeah, of course.
They do base around leadership, and the first one was, I guess, how do you train a leader? Like, can someone be born a leader? We often hear that people are born leaders, but how do you train a leader?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question, and I feel like we could talk for hours just on this question alone. When we talk about leadership, you're right. I think that when we even try and identify it in children, you know, that kid's a natural leader. They're going to be a leader one day. The truth is that leadership in reality is a skill. It's something that can be learned. And in terms of how you do that, I mean, so much of leadership is about people. So it's really about empowering others and helping them improve and create success and creating leaders around you. Some people think, oh, a leader has great followers. Well, no, a great leader creates great leaders around them. Yep. In order to do that, I think because leadership is about serving other people, it really has to start with the self, because if you don't have a level of self-awareness around your own strengths and your own weaknesses and your natural leading style, that's naturally going to stop you when it comes to building up the people around you. As an example, as a personal example, I am naturally the kind of person, I like to be liked. So I like to have mates.
I like to be liked as well.
Yeah, I like people to like me. You know, I can admit that. That's a natural tendency that I have. And so on my journey, when I first started, one of the things that I really struggled with was giving people negative feedback when I thought it might hurt their feelings or compromise our relationship. You know, I would really struggle to do that. And I think something that I had to come to terms with was I actually had to put my ego aside and say, okay, I'm not helping someone if I don't pull them up and say, hey, that wasn't correct, or that wasn't right, or you need to improve here. So that was something that I probably will have to continue to work on for a very long time.
I feel like I can relate to that actually. And if I just jump in here quickly, it was more about like, you know, we talked about, you know, finding it hard to sort of correct someone or help someone out. But I feel that, you know, if I'm at training or during the game or after a game and I see someone who, you know, I want to help or I think could do with some of, you know, knowledge that I've learned in my time that I want to pass on. Well, you know, you want to go over there and you want to help this person out, but, you know, they might not want the help or, you know, you are a little bit standoffish, but at the end of the day, you're doing that because you care and you want them to be better. You want yourself to be better and you want the team to be better. And I feel like you can relate that to obviously a team sport, obviously rugby league as an environment, and then also like in a business world where you are working with teams. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Completely agree. I think that being able to put yourself aside, because I mean, when you would hesitate to correct someone, like that's a very selfish thing. Yeah. That's a very, I don't want you to not like me. Yeah. So it's all about you. When great leaders, it's not about you. It's about the people around you. And I think that sometimes you have to be willing to have those hard conversations to build up the people around you. When you keep moving, then there's also that element, of course, of accountability and understanding that as a leader, sometimes I meet people and they say, you know, I've met with business leaders and they've said, my team sucks, right? They're not doing well, you know, and they're frustrated. They're not doing well. They're not motivated. that's on them, right? And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like when you start playing this, let's look for all these reasons why things aren't going well. Well, as a leader, if things are good, that's on the team. Credit to everyone in the team. If things aren't good, you start in the mirror and you have to say, I'm going to have to take accountability for this, because everything flows from the top, man. Everything.
Yeah,
when we talk
yeah,
good teams and bad teams, you've got to look to the top for what's happening from there. And then, of course, sorry, I'm still just rambling on.
Please go on. I'm loving this.
But then, of course, there is that element. Once you've got that foundation of self and you know that I'm going in and I'm confident I'm willing to do what I have to, you have to then figure out your team, because everyone's different. So you have to understand with all of the different people in my team, well, what motivates them? You can't train motivation. You have to tap into motivation. So what is it that's driving them? And then how can I use that to help them perform at a really high standard? So I think that then leads into things like, how can I then build a positive culture and a culture of high performance and a culture of growth and learning? And all of that becomes really connected. But also so much of it is about people.
I will relate that again back to rugby league, because you're totally right. And I think of, a rugby league locker room or a change room at training, right? And there's boys and men from all different types of backgrounds and all different cultures. And, we're coming together as one with one common goal, but every person is different and has a different background, like I said. So that's a challenge for the leaders, the coaching staff to, as you said, get the best out of them individually. And what works for one person might not necessarily work for someone else.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's the job as, I guess, the leadership group, the senior players, the coaching staff, to find that out about each individual player and get the best out of them. How do you get the best out of them?
Absolutely. And I think even for yourself as a person with a leadership position in your team, you would have scenarios where one of the younger guys might be having a bit of a tough time, and you might know, well, with this guy, I've just got to go super direct and say, mate, get your stuff together and push on.
Definitely.
And then with someone else might not respond well to that.
You're 100% right there.
With someone else, you might have to give them a pump up. You can do this. It's going to be all good. And so you've got to be able to adapt your approach based on that person. And I think there's a real intrinsic understanding of human behavior there that comes into it, and figuring out and observing people and really trying to suss out, well, what makes this person tick?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like over time, like you create that relationship with people where, you do know what works. So, for example, there are people that I would talk to throughout the dressing room who definitely respond to some way more, like, I guess, out there conversation, confronting, where other people you need to go with a bit of a softer approach, because they come, it's a little bit totally different.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing about coming together and building a culture, and not only like a culture, but a successful, thriving culture. And I've been a part of some amazing teams where we've just had such a good culture, such a good friendship bond, and you just enjoy what you're doing when everything is right.
That's it.
You know what I mean? And you just all on the same page and just heading towards success, and it's unstoppable.
Absolutely. And I think there's also that element of being one and knowing, like, I'm a firm believer that you're as strong as your weakest person when it comes to team dynamics. And so being able to pinpoint not only how can we bring up people who are already performing, but how can we make sure that we're all aligned when it comes to that motivation and drive too.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I quickly want to touch on a few books that I've read over the past 12 months.
Yeah.
And it's by a Navy SEAL called Jocko Willink. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
So he's written 2 books with another SEAL, Leif Babin, and the books are Dichotomy of Leadership and Extreme Ownership. Now, some of the things that I've read in these books are amazing. So these guys were Navy SEALs, but now they train the Navy SEALs. So you can imagine the type of people that they are. They're leaders of the Navy SEALs.
Wow.
So you've got to be one person to get into the Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
And then to be the big dog of the Navy SEALs. And, the main things that I guess I got from these books were, like, leaders remain calm when confronted with serious situations. They think quickly. and they build a good culture. Obviously, these guys live completely different lives to a lot of us. It's life and death with them. But quite often we refer in the rugby league world to guys that are on the battlefield, and in terms of team first, helping out your mates, doing anything for your mate. And it is, I guess, where you can relate it to rugby league, because on the field, it's, obviously it's not life and death, but you can still relate it to, these types of things. And I just thought that these guys, I got so much out of these books.
Yeah.
And the way that, they run a business now called Echelon Front, where they consult for big businesses in America. And what type of business would not want to be consulted by these types of guys?
I know, right? I think it's so cool. And Dichotomy of Leadership is on my list.
Yeah,
it is on my list,
seriously.
must read. And I think that when we talk Navy SEALs, again, a lot about understanding of, say, resilience, and how do we develop resilience and grit and the ability to persevere. A lot of that comes from those areas when we talk about, we use studies of people from those fields to say, okay, well, maybe we can then bring this into being an athlete or into being in the corporate world. Very, very cool.
I think I quickly want to touch on, you just mentioned the word resilience, and it's one of my favourite words these days.
Is it?
It is.
Top 5?
It is.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I look at it from the angle of being a professional athlete, right? And, through the course of your career, it's dead set the biggest roller coaster one of the biggest roller coasters you can go on throughout your life.
Yeah.
The career of a professional athlete, it's not all highs, and people just see the highs, like the grand final wins, the gold medals, the world championships, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the time, there's really rock bottom lows, out of form, no contract, injury.
Yeah.
And that's one thing in the position that I am at the Sharks, where I try and talk to some of our younger guys about building that resilience and making sure that, when injury occurs or a form slump happens or, something that really rocks them, that they just need to be strong and hold that resilience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I feel it's important for me, even that's something I want to teach my kids, when they grow up, because some of our younger guys, they're going to face games where they don't play very well, but it's happened and they can't control what's happened in the past.
That's it.
But the thing they can control now is how they bounce back. The say of a man is that, it's all well and good when everything's going really well, but how are you going how are you as a person when things are going really bad?
Yeah.
Are you still, staying focused? Are you still preparing as best you can for the game? So what I want to get onto is if someone's had a bad game, well, wipe that. You can't control that now.
Yeah.
But what you can control right now is your attitude towards your life. Turn up to training the next day, smile on your face, rip into your training, rip into your review. This is what I could have done better. I could have been better here. I let myself down here. Next time I get on the training paddock, rip and tear.
Yeah.
And I think that resilience is just one of the biggest things that I want to try and push in the position that I'm in.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't think technology helps with that, because we see only those highs and the successes. And what's that whole thing? You became an overnight success and it took you 10 years to do so, right? So it's one of those things where we really need to get accustomed to the fact that you're going to have bad times, as you said, and knowing that that is a part of the process when it comes to becoming successful.
Definitely.
And the other thing, it's about how you respond to the situation.
Yeah.
So that's about managing your mindset and not letting that manage you. Whereas some people, you'll have a bad day or something bad will go wrong. And obviously in the world that you're in, there is a lot more pressure there, because that's really inflated, because you're not just, it's not like if I go in and I have a bad meeting and I go home and no one else knows about that, but you guys, you're really in that public eye, which would, I guess, make everything that much bigger.
Yeah.
But it's also about, positivity is really important, I think.
Agree.
I think that when we talk positivity though, everyone has bad moments. It's okay to have a bad moment. I don't sometimes you get trainers, in my world that say everything's fine. You just have to smile and pretend everything's okay, but it's all right. Sometimes you have a crappy day and you can accept that, but it's about working with the emotions that serve you. So, okay, I've had a bad game. I get off the field. That was bad. That feeling of negativity, that can serve you in the sense of what can I do to improve?
Yeah, drive you.
Right?
Definitely.
What can I change now so that the next time it's going to be better? Once it's served its purpose, you got to move on. Like exactly as you said,
Yep.
and you've got to focus on what you can control.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's always my philosophy, even like how I play now. Like I said before, if I do play a bad game or if I play a good game, like my process or my habits are exactly the same. So depending, we might lose by 1 point or we might win by 30. After the game and the lead up to the next game, I'll do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And that's like, I guess, habits, routine, and a structure that I've sort of built through my career over the course of, a number of years. That's what works for me. But I feel like that's important. It's always about, I heard there's a college coach, his name's Dave O'Sweeney, he coaches the Clemson Tigers. They're the number 1 ranked football team in college football. And his philosophy is win or lose, it's always about what's next.
Yeah.
And I love that. And
That's
I think,
awesome.
Not only athletes, but business people could, potentially read into that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think so many of us naturally, I mean, myself included, we're ruled by emotions. You have a good day, so you feel on top of the world. And then you have a bad day, so then that starts to affect you. And I think it's so important to focus on trying to maintain your habits. And I love that also for you, like even if you've won a game, that's not then going to throw you off track where you kind of get complacent and think, well, I'm done then. I think that's a really good approach to take for sure.
All right, well, let's move on. I've got a quick question for around goals and goal setting.
Yes.
And, how should someone set goals? Do they set short, mid, long-term goals? Like, what's your views on goal setting?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those things we could probably talk for hours by itself, just a whole talk on goals. There is a chapter in the book, shameless plug, on goals. When we talk about, it's easy to set goals.
Yep.
And I mean that in the sense of most people, when it comes around to New Year's, they're going to write down some resolutions. They feel really good about themselves, but it's really easy to then put that in a drawer somewhere and never look at it again. So for me, it's less about how many goals you set and more about how effectively you set them. So a few things that I think can really help. Sometimes we get a little bit too caught up around it has to be, this particular outcome. We have to achieve X amount of dollars or whatever it is, when really focusing on what you can control is really important. And most of the time, when you set up processes and systems that create success facilitating habits. So when you set up, I talked to when I was writing the book, I used to write 1,500 words a day. That's a habit that's continued on even past the book being written. So it's about setting yourself up so that you end up with some good habits being formed and focusing on what you can control. The other thing is, you have to make sure whatever goal you set that it has a level of meaning to it, that you're actually going to be motivated to achieve it. We know that if you don't have a high level of commitment to something and you're not really that motivated, well, you're probably not going to achieve that goal. So making sure on the day when you get up and you say, I really don't feel like doing X, whatever it is to achieve the goal, it needs to be so connected to you that you have that intrinsic motivation. You can connect it to something bigger.
Yep.
Yeah. I also think reviewing your goals often, celebrating the little wins, and then also having an element of flexibility as well, because we know, especially when something is really challenging, and your goals should be challenging because that's the point of them, but especially if something's really challenging, having the flexibility so that you can roll with the punches and you don't end up scrapping the whole thing as soon as one thing doesn't go 100% your way, for sure. I know you're big on goals though. Like I'm so curious around the way that you set your goals, because I know that that's a really big part of how you go through your time.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of goals, and I guess, the things, the goal setting that I do, like I will write down a daily goal and something that is important to me that I want to get done, and why I do that is it makes me accountable. As soon as I put something on a piece of paper on my diary in my room, it's like, man, you better get this done. and I'll be honest, there's times where I've written a goal down and I haven't done it.
Yeah.
And then I'll write I'll cross it in the end. And it stings.
Yeah.
It's a bad feeling when you put a cross there on a goal. But I am a big believer in goals. I think, short, mid and long term, I probably plan and have goals for too many things. But, I have goals around, I guess, for example, reading books, reading a certain amount of books per year. So the last 2 years I've had a goal to read 10 books a year, which for some people isn't that much. But for someone like me who went through school, didn't read a single book, all I wanted to do was play rugby league. And now I'm at a stage where I can read 10 books a year pretty easily and I really enjoy it. Well, that's a massive win for me.
Absolutely, that's huge.
And you just said before about celebrating your wins, and I think that's important. If you do write a goal and you tick it off, like celebrate.
Yeah.
Celebrate that.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really good. And I think it's also cool for people to have, personal goals around family, and that type of thing, but then also professional goals and what you want to be, in your workplace, goals and visions and where you want to see yourself in 5 years. Do you want to be doing the same thing in 5 years? Do you want to be in a different position that's a little bit higher? Do you want to go for that, I guess, that raise or that promotion? And I think that's a part of, the evolution of growth of a human.
Absolutely.
And I'm really interested in that. So, I love setting goals.
Yeah.
I love it. Do you set goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a short, mid, and then long term, I think of it less as like a goal really, really long term and more of like the sort of vision of the ideal, this is where I want to end up.
Definitely, I do too.
And I think for me, something I've been working on a lot lately, because when it comes to my professional life, I'm very rigid around setting goals and what I want to achieve. But something I've been trying to do lately is actually pull back. And I love that you said you should have goals for everything. Like I've been trying to pull back and really assess other areas of my life too.
Yeah, that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, and say, wow, like, can I spend more time with my family? Can I make that something that I'm going to spend, dedicate a goal to? And can I explore this different area that might be a hobby and might not be related to what I do?
Yep.
So I think that well-roundedness is also really cool, that you can incorporate all those different things.
I think a normal goal for someone would be even like to have like a family dinner every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like what a great goal that
Beautiful.
would be.
Absolutely.
So, if you're out there, spend more time with your family.
That's the key point. Key takeaway.
I'll move on. And I quickly wanted to touch on another book, and it's probably one of my favorites.
Yep.
And you've read it.
Yes.
High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard.
Yes. Killer book.
One of my top probably 3-5 favorite books I've read. And the things I got out of it were, I guess, building, habits, consistency, routine, and professionalism.
Absolutely.
And then I think, and I relate that to some of the people that I've come across in rugby league who I think are the most professional players I've ever come across. And three people really come to mind. And that's probably Nathan Friend, who I play with at the Warriors, and then Paul Gallen, who's just recently retired, the greatest Sharks player of all time.
Yeah.
And then now our current coach, who's John Morris. Now, I was lucky enough to play at the start of my career with John Morris. And one thing I really noticed about all these players was just how professional they were with their bodies and how much time and effort they put into them. And not just one day a week, it was literally every day of the week. And their days off, they're going to the pool, they're going to the sauna, they're stretching, they're seeing physio, getting massages. And seeing these guys when I was a bit younger do this stuff so consistently, that's what taught me the way of being a professional athlete.
Absolutely.
Like I saw these guys, and the amount of times I used to see Gal, I could walk into the shower and he's just sitting in the ice bath, and he'd be there for 10, 20 minutes, just going between that and the spa. And that was a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
Like literally every time I'd walk in there, he would be in there. And, this guy's 37 years old, but he's still doing this. He's just about to retire. There's 2 weeks to go in his career.
Yeah.
And he's still doing this.
Yeah.
Like that's a mindset.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I also, sorry to jump in, but
okay.
I also think even talking about the people that you're surrounding yourself with and finding people that you can look up to and that you can emulate is so important, and really assessing the people that you do have around you, because some people go the other way and then they'll have people around them that bring them down. And I think everyone is always either going to be bringing you down or pushing you up. So you've got to make sure that you find those great mentor figures across your journey.
And one thing I guess I did notice with these guys was that these guys two of them, or Friendy played 250 games, but John Morris and Paul Gallen played over 300 games, looked after their body, played long careers. And when I was that younger kid who, was still finding my feet, I guess, in professional sport, obviously I would love to play a long career. So for someone who's a bit younger, you're absolutely silly not to look up to someone who's doing this and just copy what they do.
That's it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Exactly, don't.
Like there's no secret. Like find someone who's done it and they've done it well and be dedicated enough.
I love that.
To put it in practice for sure.
And I think that there's obviously, you could relate that to a lot of things where, if it's a rugby league player, if it's someone at your work who potentially could be, a little bit more successful. If there's a real estate agent who's selling a little bit more in property.
Yeah.
If there's, professionals that are doing a little bit better jobs than you,
absolutely,
earning more money than you. What are these guys doing that you're potentially not?
Absolutely.
And find out what they're doing and just copy them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And it's so much simpler than you would expect it to be, right? Because you just have to figure out, what does my next step look like? Find the person who is that next step.
But I feel like the profession or the guys that are in that position didn't get in that position overnight.
Yes.
And these guys were one day that person who was earning a little bit less money, who wasn't selling as much real estate, who was just started out playing NRL. And these guys had those people above them to, copy.
Absolutely.
And hard work, dedication, as you mentioned before, habits, consistency, routines, professionalism.
Absolutely.
That stuff all comes into it.
And being in it for the long haul, right? Like one of the blockers that I talk about in the book is around short-sightedness and this idea that, you get people who go into their first corporate job and it's been a few months and suddenly they're wondering why they're not the manager and they're not leading everyone and they're not doing everything.
Yep.
And so really being able to zoom out is so important, and recognizing that those big key figures, they were once in the same spot you're in right now, for sure.
Definitely. I love that. All right. I'll move on to I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
And that's, what's one thing everyday people should do to live more efficiently?
One thing.
One thing.
One thing.
You can elaborate.
Okay. So I'm going to go with a few things.
Okay, please.
I think one of the most important, and I mean, I won't spend much time on it because I think we've spoken about it already, is around working with intention. So waking up in the day and having really clear intentions around what you actually want to achieve and what you want to do, because that way you're working proactively rather than just responding to everything that's happening. So much of the time I think it's so easy to fall into that rabbit hole where you're responding and you're so busy and there's so much going on, there's so much that you could be doing at any point in time, and you might end up having a really long day and coming home and collapsing on the couch and then realizing I didn't even get done that one thing that I probably should have done. The other thing, and this is like a bit of a pet peeve of mine, stop multitasking.
Yeah.
Stop trying to do 3 things at once.
So why should people stop multitasking?
So I think it became like a really big fad, right? Look how many different things I can do at the same time. And you might be on the phone and trying to do emails and trying to do other things. We know, and when you look into the neuroscience of it, your brain's not actually capable of doing more than one thing at once. So when we think that we're doing 3 different tasks, what's actually happening in our brain is our brain is moving from one thing to the next and back again really quickly. And ultimately that just becomes way more draining and takes up a lot more energy and you get less done. I think from an efficiency point of view, I mean, I always say, and I got it from someone else, so it's not mine, but I always say, whatever you do, do it well. So if you're going to do something, go all in, go deep focus. That alone, I think, makes such a big difference because you're not half doing 5 things. You're focused in on actually completing whatever task it is that you're going for. And I imagine, of course, with sport, like that would be incredibly important.
Definitely.
Some other things that I would say is, I mean, we've spoken about mentors and things in terms of efficiency. Assess what you're taking in, assess the information you're taking in around you, and assess the people that you're, I guess, taking in and consuming, the people you're surrounding yourself with.
And I'll quickly just jump in there because I think that is an outstanding point. And I think that, quite often we hear the phrase like, you are the average of the top maybe 5 people you hang around with.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're hanging around people that are bringing you down and potentially, bagging you out for doing certain things, like you're hanging yourself, you're putting yourself around the wrong crowd.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, people these days, they need to surround themselves with good people who are going to build them up and, give them support around their life decisions and what they want to do. Like that is so important. I feel like that nowadays. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Completely agree. And I think, the people element's really big. I think the information element's really big. Like I'm very curious around with you, like there would be so many different pools of information that are always coming, from all different directions. And I'm curious as to how you kind of monitor what you choose to consume and what information you choose to take in and what you've found kind of works there.
Yeah, well, definitely. It's a good question because obviously, being a professional athlete, when, you are playing, like you're right out there. You're accessible to everyone. Everyone sees you.
Yeah.
TV, social media, etc. In the crowd, and then after the game, let's just say you've had a poor game. You come off the field and your coach is India. Yeah. The fans are India. The commentators are India. There's an article during the week in the papers about how bad your team is or how bad you've played. And it's probably maybe not one article. There might be like 3 or 4 from all, 3 or 4 different journos.
Yeah.
But to answer your question on how I consume that stuff, so I am a big user of social media because I really think I choose to use it in a positive way. But I also am very wary of, people like trolls and people who are just out there to just say certain things to try and bring you down. So, I'll never, ever respond to someone who's written something to me negatively. I've never bought a paper. I don't read the paper, and I don't watch rugby league shows during the week. And it even got to a point where last season so I love rugby league. I love watching footy.
Of course.
I watch it from, I guess a different angle to a lot of normal people because it's more like what type of plays are these guys doing? Can we learn something from here? Like what's Cooper Cronk doing? What kick has he done this week? Oh, do I need to try and practice how to train and things like that? And it got to the point where I was like, nah, I'm not watching footy. I don't want to watch footy.
Really?
I want to get to a point where I just want to clear my mind. I just want to erase footy from when I'm at home, and then when I'm at training and when it's time to work, like rip in and work. But don't consume the information that you don't need to away from footy because it's just garbage.
Yeah.
Like it really is.
Yeah,
and
for
there's
sure.
that many, garbage articles out there with ridiculous headlines that just they try and suck you in from a headline and say something absolutely ridiculous. And there's just no point in reading it.
Yep. You ever tempted to respond to a troll? I feel like I would be really tempted to respond.
No, usually I just block.
Yeah.
Block and delete. But I feel like it speaks more about the type of person that they are than myself. Like I said on the last podcast that I was watching a semi-final game, right? And I won't say which team it was or which player, but basically the teams were playing and it was like coming into like the clutch moment, the last 10 minutes of the game. And this one player made a pretty bad error and it put his team under a lot of pressure. Anyway, his team ended up losing. And I said to my wife, I sat there and I was like, Dale, there's people out there that would see that this guy's just made a mistake. Their team's lost. They would pick up their phone straight away, search this guy's name on Instagram and just direct message him one of the most vile messages you can ever think of.
Gosh, isn't that terrible? And
I've copped my fair share of vile messages, and I'm sure a lot of other rugby league players have as well. But to put it out there, like I would not respond to that. And if someone direct messages me or comments something positive to me, like quite often I'll respond because you've just taken the time to say, hey mate, great game, or you're doing really well. And it's like, man, thank you so much. Like you've just taken the time to say something really positive to me. Like, and I think that sort of kind of builds that relationship or builds that community.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's basically my views on that type of stuff.
No, I think it's interesting. And I think so much of it relates to preserving, like self-preservation, but then also preserving your ambition and your drive and really figuring out, well, what's actually going to help me? Like that stuff doesn't serve you. So being able to filter it out, I imagine, is such an important part, especially for an athlete who's going or who has already had like a long-term career in the sport.
Yep.
For sure.
All right. So I touched on before that I read 10 books a year, sorry.
Yeah.
So how much reading would you do? I know you do a lot of writing, as you just said before.
Yeah.
But how much reading do you do?
Yeah, look, I read every day.
Yeah.
Although I have to say it wasn't like for you, I feel like it was an intentional, this is going to be a good habit to get into.
Yeah.
I just happened to be a nerd when I was a kid. So it's something that I started doing. You know, I still have memories when I was like 7 or 8 years old and my parents would come in at 2 a.m. and be like, Sonia, put the book down.
Oh, wow.
You have to go to school in the morning. So for me, it's...
So it's fair to say it came natural to you.
It did come naturally to me, and I do read a lot. I've always got a couple of books going at once. I normally I'm big on audiobooks, so I'll normally have an audiobook happening in the car and then I'll try and read for a certain amount of time every evening, like before I go to bed. But that's a habit that I've had forever. And I think it's such a good way to not only get into personal development, but it's also a bit of downtime too. I think
definitely.
taking out the time to work on yourself and actually learn. I mean, it's a bit indulgent, it's a bit fun, but it's also something that's so important.
Yep. So could you recommend myself any books?
Yes.
And why?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen my... No, I'm kidding. I think that some of the really good ones, I like to read a diverse amount of books. So like right now I'm reading a weird book about sleep disorders. So I have a lot of variety. In terms of things around personal development, I'm going to say... I know that you haven't read anything by Grant Cardone yet, so I want you to read a Grant Cardone book.
All I see about Grant Cardone is his videos on Instagram.
Yes.
And he's in the big front of the big jet.
Yeah.
And he's talking about 10X and he's got this American accent.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, I like Grant Cardone. He gets a bit psyched sometimes. So some of his stuff is probably a bit over the top, especially for an Australian audience where we are so chill comparatively.
They're very different Americans, aren't they?
They're very extreme. Like I've had some people who go a little bit too far, like with the Americanisms and try and bring that into like sales or leadership. And I have to say, well, man, relax.
I feel like even you relate that to sport. Like I quite often talk about sport and the way that Australians are with our sporting. And I feel like we're a little bit more humble and reserved
absolutely.
in our sport. And even like I touched on in the last podcast, our celebrations and things like that. Where then when you look at American sport, like it's a show. They are so out there. They're having a good time. They're celebrating. They're leery. And I feel like Australians need more of that.
Do you think so?
Like in the sporting world, that sort of celebration stuff. But even, if I could compare, Grant Cardone to the Australian Grant Cardone, Cardone would be so much more out there in your face,
absolutely.
talking about it, putting everything on show, where the Australian person might be a little bit more reserved.
Absolutely.
But still trying to get out his point. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, completely agree. I think I want you to read one of his books because there's good stuff you can take from it, but you definitely have to find that within the really extreme, extravagant kind of over the top elements as well.
So what book is by Grant Cardone?
The one I would start, I mean, he's got a lot of them, but the one I would start with is the 10X rule.
So what is the 10X?
I mean,
I've heard him obviously talk about a lot of it on Instagram and online, and that's what he's pushing. But what does it stand for?
I mean, basically, it's an action thing. So the whole concept is to not only think about doubling your results, but think about how can I 10X my results. So trying to change your viewpoint to really zoom. That's what I mean. It's a bit intense.
10 times by 10.
Yeah, times by 10. But then also relating that to levels of activity and what am I doing? And essentially, it's like how can I pump up whatever I'm going for in a really big, extreme way. It's that massive action element. And you get that from a lot of different trainers. But I think that it's got some nice, simple, practical things in there as well, for sure. Yep. Other people that are cool, I love Tim Ferriss.
Yep, I love Tim Ferriss.
We love Tim Ferriss.
What do you think of the 4-hour work week, though?
4-hour work week, yeah. I think that the idea that you only need to work 4 hours in order to be a very successful person per week is something that is a great hook to get people to read your book. I don't think it's realistic, but I do think the idea of maximizing your efficiency and getting as much as possible out of the actions you take and automating where you can, I think those points are really good. What about you?
Yeah, well, I've read a few books, obviously, as I mentioned, but, like Tim Ferriss, like The Tribe of Mentors, I really like that. As I said before, the 2 books by Jocko. One book that I really found interesting was Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah. Viktor Frankl, very cool.
What?
Is it Viktor Frankl?
Yes, yes. And that really hit home with me.
How so?
Oh, it was more like, you know, the way that he portrayed himself and mentally got himself through such a difficult time. You know, I thought that was, you know, in the toughest of conditions you can ever imagine, yet his thought process was still positive.
Yeah. And that power of mindset.
Power of
meaning.
mindset. His mind is so strong.
Yeah.
And in a way, I almost think that he was thinking about, like, what's next for me?
Yeah.
He's thinking past this concentration camp
Absolutely.
when he's been in there for so long. Like, how do you teach the mind to get to that space, you know?
I mean, everyone should read Viktor Frankl's book.
Seriously, I will
For
say that to
sure.
everyone. If you
For
haven't
sure.
read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, it is an amazing book.
For sure. I think the only other one, I mean, I feel like, again, we could talk about this for hours, but the only other one that I would bring up is I've been getting really into, probably in the last year or so, into Stoicism and Stoic books. And that's, I mean, Stoicism is like an ancient philosophy, and it's really at its core around focusing on what you can control. And there's a lot around mindset and moving forward. And there are some great writers out there like Ryan Holiday, or even going back and reading from the philosophers themselves, that are really cool in the sense of being able to apply that to your day-to-day life as well, and using that to drive you. And also, okay, I'm going to stop now.
Go on, that's fine,
I'm going to stop
please.
now. Last one, Cal Newport wrote a book called Deep Work that is really cool, and that's about how to get in flow and really focus, and how to essentially be as effective as you possibly can in a way where you're not distracted. So I thought that was really good too.
Oh, beautiful. All right. So, you know, for both of us, I feel like, you know, we're right into that, I guess, the personal development.
Yes.
And learning to be better and how to be better, you know, personally and professionally. So what would someone like yourself do for PD, professional development?
Yeah.
Like, do you go to, you know, conferences? Obviously reading is a big one, but like what do you do for personal development?
Yeah, I mean, of course there's the element of reading. I do try and get to different kinds of conferences, probably once or twice a year. I'm probably not as good at it at the moment as I should be. I have a business mentor and coach myself, and I work with him a lot to try and help me on the personal development area. And I mean, Brendan Burchard, how do you say his name?
Burchard, yeah.
Burchard. Brendan Burchard, when in one of his things that he writes about that really stuck with me is this idea of setting your own curriculum. So figuring out what you want to achieve. Like a few months ago, I took up Mandarin, and I'm taking that as like a new, I'm not going to say anything on the air. but
wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, but that's something that I see as a valuable skill set that will help me activate different, you know, skills and parts of my brain.
Oh, definitely.
Even though it's not directly related to what I'm doing at the moment. So I think the main thing with personal development is making the time to do it, even if it's only a little bit. Like everything's just about progress and really trying to make sure that you get a little bit better every single day, and you try something that's going to help you every single day, even if it's something really small.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'll move on to, I guess, I'll quickly want to touch on meditation and what you like, you know, you talk about progress, and I quite often read and hear about a lot of, you know, successful business people are into meditation and practice it religiously on a daily basis, sometimes twice daily. Have you ever tried meditation, and what are your thoughts on it?
This is a good question. My brother is a huge meditator. He meditates for last time I spoke, I think it's like an hour or two a day.
Wow.
Like he has but he worked up to that.
Yeah.
But he is very dedicated. And I think I, like you, have read all about it, and then you get this, okay, this is obviously something that works for people. And I dabble in it. I have tried to work with it, and it's something that I think takes so much time to develop as a skill, because meditation is really about assessing, being in the moment and really being present in the moment, and only being present in the moment, and assessing, you know, what's happening on a sensory level, and being able to sort of clear yourself out that way. I don't do it as routinely as I should, but I do think I think that's the kind of thing, when you do it, you feel the impact of it. But I also think it's one of those skills that I sort of thought I'd jump in and just do a little 2-hour meditation. It's going to be fantastic. But I ended up starting at like 4 or 5 minute meditations. And now I could probably do one for like 10 or 15 minutes, but it's still, compared to a lot of really successful people, I mean, it's still something that's very, very short a period of time compared with them. Do you do it?
I haven't done it for quite a while, to be honest, but as I said, I read a lot about it and I wanted to try it and test it out. So I got an app. I can't remember what the name of the app was, and it was basically start with 3 minutes and I got to 5 minutes, and I would do it. I'd basically wake up, have breakfast, and then meditate before I'd go to training.
Yeah.
So I'd lay on the ground, I wouldn't just sit there and cross my legs and,
do the Om thing.
The Om. But I'd basically just lay there and just try and focus on my breathing. And I did it routinely for maybe about a month.
Yeah.
And I started to ask myself, was I getting, any benefits? Well, I couldn't feel any physical benefits from it, but I find it really hard to sit still.
But I also imagine as an athlete, like so much of that, like for me, it's about, I feel the benefit in the sense of controlling the breathing.
Yeah.
And I think breathing exercises are really cool. But then I would imagine as a professional athlete, you're so attuned to that already.
Yeah.
So I can see how that might be, I don't know, I guess I can appreciate the concept that you might have been questioning how much physically you were gaining from it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why, I wasn't sure if I was getting any benefits from it. And, in the morning I'd go to training, I'd still feel the same. I would still be like, I'd be calm. But then I thought to myself, like, is there another time that I could potentially do it? And then I thought to myself, there's times in pre-season where it's, 35 degrees. It's so hot. We're out in the middle of the field. We've been running around for an hour and a half, to 2 hours just doing fitness. I'm absolutely exhausted. And then I think to myself, wow, if I was to, finish that field session and just lay in the shade and just focus on my breathing for 3 to 5 minutes, shut my eyes.
Yeah, cool.
Like, I think I would benefit more in that position to really, bring myself back, because obviously my thoughts have just been going crazy. Like, take yourself back to, in yourself and think, focus on breathing, thoughts. I feel like that potentially could
absolutely
be a better time for me.
I think maybe times of stress are the best. I mean, for me, that's when it works, is when I'm feeling stressed out and there's a lot going on. Good point. Are you going to try it? Now you have to.
I will. We're coming into pre-season now, so I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, see how it goes.
It's an interesting one. All right, the last question I have for you is an interesting one, and this one is, I want to know the 3 people that you would go to dinner with and why.
Stop. That's a hard
3
question.
people. All right. Well, how about we put it 5?
5. Giving me more options. Are they dead or alive?
That can be either or. And why?
Stop.
Like, why are these people so important to you? Or why would that conversation be a good one for yourself?
Are you going to answer the question? Do you want to start to give me some thinking time? No.
This is the question for you.
Okay. I think I definitely, I talked about Stoicism a little bit earlier, and I would love to meet Marcus Aurelius, who is one of the writers. He wrote Meditations, not about meditating, but about, different ways of living your life. And I would love to meet with him to have a chat about all of that and get some more insights from him.
Yep.
You want to mix, right? Are we caring about how fun the party is? Does that matter? The dynamics? Are they all going to get along?
Nah, it doesn't matter. They can hate each other.
All right.
It's more about you. It's about you and what you want to get out of it.
All right, cool. I think someone who's a great business leader. I don't know who would be my biggest. Maybe like a Richard Branson. He'd be fun too.
Yeah.
He'd be fun. But I think you could learn a lot from him.
He's done some amazing stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's done some cool things. Maybe someone who's done something really cool in politics. I don't know who though. That's the thing.
Australian politics?
Oh, I don't know how much Australians have done much in politics. Probably not. I would tab that. Someone profound in politics that I could learn something from.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm very old school. I love Will Shakespeare. I'd probably bring him along for the ride.
Yeah, cool.
Learn a little bit because he's had probably the biggest impact on, literature and the arts
definitely.
over the course of life. And then I don't know. They have to be real people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not like character in a movie.
You can take yeah, that's fine. That's fine. What character in a movie?
I don't know. I was thinking some sort of like James Bond scenario because you could learn a lot potentially around like strategy from there. No, in all seriousness, I'd probably go someone great from business, someone great from politics, someone great from literature, and then
what about entertainment?
Entertainment. Entertainment would be good. I don't know. Ellen DeGeneres would be cool.
Yeah.
She's had a cool journey. Learn a lot from her.
Very successful.
I would say some of the people that you and I read a lot about, but there's also like we've read their books.
Yeah.
How much are you going to teach me?
Yeah.
If I've read your book.
Yeah.
So that was my very vague answer.
Yeah. When I get asked this question, actually, so I always think of you saying, someone from a different array of backgrounds. Yeah. But like obviously, sport. Yeah. Someone entertainment, and then someone from business. And I think something that I could learn off someone each individually. Like that's my take on the question.
So who are your people?
Well, geez, I'll say three. And I've been asked this question before. So, business, I'd say Warren Buffett. Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
Investing.
Yeah, good one.
I think that it would be amazing. My sporting person would be Roger Federer.
Nice.
I'm a massive fan of Roger Federer. I love what he's done in tennis, where he came from, how he was as a younger tennis player, basically a hothead, but then how he is now. Like I love, and we haven't really touched on vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I feel like we could potentially leave that for next time. But the way that when Roger Federer, like if he's playing for a Grand Slam in the final and he wins, like there's no issues with him with crying and shedding tears because that's just what it means to him. And I love that on the biggest stage, he's out there, and if he wins, like the emotion just gets to him. And he cries. A grown man, he cries because he shows that's how much it means to him.
Absolutely.
And I just love the way he plays his tennis. Obviously his record, his career speaks for itself. He'll get in as probably one of the greatest tennis players of all time. And then the last person would be someone who I've become a massive fan of over the last few years, and that's Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, why didn't I think of Gary? I feel like all these great names are popping up into my head
I'm sure
now.
if you had some time to prepare, you'd be able to answer that.
But no, Gary V's a good one.
But Gary V was basically the reason as to why I've started vlogging and, podcast and YouTube, and basically was my influence on doing this all this sort of stuff and putting yourself out there and just having a go.
It's so cool. I think, and he's interesting, because he is one of those huge people in America.
Yep.
But he's a little bit more real.
Yeah,
Don't
I
you
agree.
think? He's a little bit more. Yeah. He doesn't put on the show, and he's very much about authenticity and being honest and vulnerable and putting that out there. Definitely. Maybe because of his background.
Yeah, he's come from such humble beginnings. Yeah. But I feel like he puts out a lot of content, where he's talking to a fan and a fan will openly ask him a question and he's getting filmed and he gets basically put on the spot right away. Whatever this question could be, and he'll cut it up and then put it on his social platforms like straight away. Yeah. Like he hasn't had time to prepare to answer for these answers.
That's so cool.
And I feel like what you said, he's so real. He speaks from what he truly believes in. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that would be my top three. It would be it wouldn't be too exciting.
Yours are better than mine. I want to go to your dinner party instead.
All right. We'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, cheers,
Sonia.
Chad. It's been awesome.
I really appreciate your time. We covered across some really interesting topics, so we might have to do it again sometime.
We may have to. I'm sure.
There's a lot more we could talk about. You can catch Sonia's book "Confidence is Uncomfortable" in bookstores, and you can also check out her website www.status1.com.au. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Cheers, Chad.
Sonia. That's it today, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast, please make sure you subscribe. Appreciate everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.